I picked her up on a Wednesday, around 11:15 at night. Corner of Ashland and Division, outside a nail salon that had been closed for 3 hours. She was standing under the awning with her phone in one hand and a small leather purse in the other, and she raised her arm the way people do when they've already requested a ride but want to make sure you see them anyway. I pulled over. She got in the back. "Paulina to Kedzie, right?" I said, checking the app. "Yes. The address on there is correct." Her voice was calm. Normal. She was maybe 35, dark hair pulled back, wearing a gray coat that looked expensive in a quiet way. I pulled away from the curb and made the left on Division, heading west. I want to be clear about something. I've been driving for 6 years. Nights, mostly, because the money's better and because I don't sleep well anyway, haven't since my 20s. I've had every kind of passenger you can imagine. Drunks, couples fighting, people crying silently in the back seat, people on the phone screaming at someone. A guy who left a handgun under the seat once. I found it when I was vacuuming the next morning and had to call the police. I've had people vomit, bleed, fall asleep and refuse to wake up at their destination. I am not someone who gets unsettled easily. I'm telling you this so you understand that what I noticed wasn't something I was looking for. It wasn't paranoia or tiredness or some late-night trick of the mind. It was just there. I adjusted my rearview mirror at the light on Damon. Habit. I do it 50 times a night without thinking. Check the passenger, check the road behind me, check the passenger again. And when I tilted the mirror down to see her, the back seat was empty. Not dark. Not obscured. Empty. The gray fabric of the seat, the seatbelt hanging unused, the slight shine on the leather where the streetlight caught it. No one. But I could hear her breathing. I could feel the weight distribution in the car. The suspension sat slightly lower on the rear passenger side, the way it always does when someone's sitting there. I looked over my shoulder. She was right there. Legs crossed at the ankle, hands in her lap, looking out the window at the taqueria on the corner. Completely solid. Completely real. I looked back at the mirror. Empty seat. The light changed. I drove. I want to tell you that I said something. That I asked her a question or pulled over or did anything at all that a reasonable person might do. But I didn't. I just kept driving west on Division, and I kept my eyes on the road, and I did not look at the mirror again for 4 blocks. Here's the thing that actually bothered me. Not the absence of her reflection. I could almost rationalize that, almost convince myself it was an angle issue, a lighting problem, some trick of the tinted windows and the sodium streetlights and my own fatigue. What bothered me was that in those 4 blocks, I became aware of something else. I couldn't see myself either. My hands were on the wheel. I could see them. I could see the dashboard, the GPS screen, the air freshener hanging from the mirror's stem. But the mirror itself showed only the road behind us, the back seat, and nothing else. No driver. No passenger. Just an empty cab moving through traffic. I angled the mirror left. I angled it right. I tilted it toward my own face. The road. The seat. The hanging air freshener from behind. No eyes looking back. Division and Western. I ran the red. Not on purpose. I just didn't see it. Or I saw it and it didn't register, because I was trying to find my own face in a 2-inch piece of reflective glass and failing. A car honked, long, angry, and I snapped back and hit the brake too hard and the woman in the back said, "Careful, in the same calm tone she'd used to confirm her address. "Sorry," I said. "Sorry. Didn't see it." "It's fine." I wanted to look at her. Not in the mirror, actually turn around and look. But the light ahead of me turned green and someone behind me honked again and I just drove. Hands at 10 and 2. Eyes forward. Heart rate doing something I didn't want to acknowledge. 2 more blocks. Quiet. The neighborhood shifting from commercial to residential, the trees getting thicker, the streetlights spacing out. Her phone buzzed once. She didn't answer it. "You can take the next right," she said. "It's faster." She was correct. It was faster. I knew that. I drive this neighborhood 6 nights a week, but I hadn't planned to take it. I'd been going to stay on Division all the way to Kedzie because that's what the GPS said. But she was right. The side street cut through without any lights. I took the right. And the moment I turned, the car got cold. Not air conditioning cold, not window open cold. Cold the way a room gets cold when a freezer has been left open for hours, that slow, seeping, accumulating chill that starts at the floor and works upward. I could feel it in my ankles first, then my knees, then my hands on the wheel. "You feel that?" I said. I don't know why I asked. "Feel what?" I didn't answer. The cold kept climbing. By the time I reached the stop sign at the end of the block, I could see my breath. I could see my breath, but I still couldn't see my face in the mirror. If you're listening to this late at night, if this is the kind of thing that keeps you up, you can subscribe. I don't tell these things to people in my life anymore. There's no one left who wants to hear them. But I think about them. Every shift, I think about them. The address was a 3-flat on a quiet block. Brick. Porch light on. Normal. She said, "This is fine," and I pulled to the curb and put it in park. And here's where it changed. She didn't get out immediately. There was a pause, maybe 4 seconds, maybe 5, where she sat in the back seat and I sat in the front and neither of us moved. I could feel her looking at me. Not at the back of my head. At me. As if the seat wasn't between us. As if she could see through it. "You noticed," she said. I didn't respond. Most drivers don't. I still didn't respond. My hand was on the gear shift. My foot was on the brake. I was ready to drive the moment the door opened. "It's not what you think," she said. "I'm not something wrong. You're not in danger. I just wanted you to know that you noticed, and most people don't, and that matters." The door opened. She stepped out. I heard her heels on the pavement, heard the door close with that solid thunk, and then she was walking up the steps of the 3-flat, and the porch light caught her, and she was just a woman in a gray coat unlocking her front door. I looked in the mirror. My face was there. Tired. Pale. Mine. I sat at the curb for maybe a full minute before I pulled away. I rated the ride 5 stars. She rated me 5 stars. The transaction completed normally. The app showed her name as M. Voss, and the charge was $11.40, and everything about it was ordinary except that for 9 minutes of my life, neither of us had existed in any reflective surface inside that car. I told myself it was done. A weird night. A strange woman. Some optical phenomenon I didn't understand. I drove 3 more rides that night and went home at 2 in the morning and took a shower and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror for a long time and everything was normal and I went to bed. Thursday. Nothing. I drove my shift. 8 rides. Nobody strange. I checked the mirror compulsively, passenger after passenger appearing exactly where they should, reflected exactly as expected. Flesh and light behaving the way flesh and light are supposed to behave. Friday. Nothing. Saturday, I got a ping at 11:20 p.m. Pickup at North and Milwaukee, outside a bookstore. When I pulled up, there was a man standing at the curb. 40s, bald, heavy coat. He got in the back. I checked the mirror. He was there. Reflected. Normal. I drove him to Logan Square, dropped him off, and moved on. 11:47 p.m. Another ping. Pickup at Chicago and Halstead, outside a bar. A couple. Woman in a red jacket, man in a baseball cap. They got in the back seat together, laughing about something. I checked the mirror. The man was reflected. The woman was not. The seat next to him appeared empty. But she was there. I could hear her, could see her when I turned my head, could feel the car's weight balanced across both rear seats. She existed. She just didn't reflect. I drove them to Wicker Park. They got out together. She touched his arm as they walked to their building. They looked happy. I sat at the curb. My own reflection was there this time. I could see my face, my hands, the interior of the cab. But where she'd been sitting, the impression in the seat hadn't bounced back yet. There was a dip in the fabric, a warmth, I imagined, though I didn't touch it. I started counting. Sunday night, 14 passengers. 2 had no reflection. Monday night, 11 passengers. 1 had no reflection. Tuesday, 16 passengers. 3. None of them seemed to know. None of them behaved strangely. None of them said anything like M. Voss had said. They were just people, getting rides, going home, going to work, going to bars. Young, old, men, women. No pattern I could identify by looking at them. No visual marker. No aura, no pallor, no strangeness in their voices or their movements. They were indistinguishable from anyone else. Except they didn't appear in mirrors. By the end of that second week, I'd started keeping a notebook. Small, black, spiral-bound. I kept it in the center console. After every ride, I'd write down the time, the pickup location, the destination, and whether the passenger reflected. I'm looking at it now. 3 weeks of data. 46 entries marked with a small X. 46 people, in 21 days, who did not exist in reflective surfaces. I started trying to find patterns. Geographic, were they clustered in certain neighborhoods? No. I picked them up everywhere. Humboldt Park, Lincoln Square, Bridgeport, The Loop. Time of night. No consistent pattern, though there were slightly more after midnight than before. Demographics. Nothing. Age, gender, ethnicity, dress, all random. Some were alone. Some were in pairs. One night I had 3 women get in together, all going to the same address in Pilsen, and only one of them reflected. That one stopped me. Because the other 2 talked to her. They shared a conversation. They took a photo together on one of their phones, all 3 leaning in and smiling. I watched them take the photo. I checked the mirror. 2 empty seats and 1 woman smiling alone. But the photo, I couldn't see the photo. It was on their phone, angled away from me. I don't know what it showed. I don't know if cameras work differently than mirrors. I don't know anything about the mechanism. I just know what the mirror showed me, and what my eyes showed me, and that these 2 sources of information disagreed. I started checking other reflective surfaces. My phone screen, when it was dark, I'd angle it toward the back seat. Same result. The windows, on very dark streets, where the glass acted like a mirror against the interior light. Same result. The polished chrome of my seat belt buckle. Same result. Whatever it wasn't specific to the rearview mirror. It was consistent across every reflective surface I could find inside the car. These people, these 46 people in 3 weeks, were physically present, thermally present, audibly present, but optically absent from any reflected image. I started watching them more carefully. Not the ones without reflections, them. The ones who did reflect. I started studying my normal passengers with an intensity that probably bordered on unsettling, looking for differences. Were the reflected ones more solid? More vivid? Did they move differently, breathe differently, respond to light differently? No. They were identical. There was no observable difference between a person who reflected and a person who didn't. The information was only available through the mirror. And here's what started to eat at me: I couldn't verify it with anyone else. I drive alone. There's no one in the front seat to say, "Hey, do you see that?" I considered installing a dashcam, one that faced inward, toward the back seat. I went to a Best Buy on my day off and stood in the camera aisle for 20 minutes and then walked out without buying anything. Because I realized I wasn't sure what I wanted the footage to confirm. If the camera showed the passengers normally, did that mean the mirrors were lying? If the camera showed empty seats, did that mean these people weren't real? And in either case, what was I supposed to do with that information? I thought about calling M. Voss. Her name was in my ride history. I could message her through the app. I didn't. I thought about asking another driver. There are forums, groups, places where people who drive share stories. I typed out a post twice and deleted it both times. Instead, I just kept driving. And counting. Week 4. I noticed something new. It happened on a Tuesday. I picked up a man on Fullerton, young, maybe 25, headphones in, barely acknowledged me. I checked the mirror. No reflection. Just an empty seat. I marked the X in my notebook at the end of the ride and moved on. 3 hours later, I got another ping. Different location. Different destination. But when I pulled up to the address on Belmont and the men got in, it was the same person. Same face. Same headphones. Same jacket. But this time, he reflected. I stared at the mirror for 3 seconds too long. He looked up and met my eyes in the glass, and he was there, clearly, unmistakably, a reflection looking back at me. "Everything okay?" he said. "Yeah. Sorry. Thought I recognized you." "Don't think so," he said, and looked back at his phone. I drove him to his destination. Different address than the first ride. I dropped him off. I checked the app. Different name on the account. Different pickup, different destination, different payment method. But it was the same face. I went back through my notebook. I'd written the first pickup time, location, and the X. I hadn't written a physical description. I'd never bothered to describe them, only mark whether they reflected or not. I couldn't verify whether this had happened before. Whether any of my X-marked rides had later appeared as normal, reflecting passengers. I started writing descriptions. Short. Just enough. Male, 25, blonde, headphones, blue jacket. Female, 40s, short hair, green scarf. Male, 60s, gray beard, cane. And within a week, I had my second match. A woman I'd picked up on Armitage with no reflection, female, 30s, red hair, tattoo left wrist, laughed on phone, appeared 6 days later on a ride from O'Hare. Same woman. Same tattoo. Same laugh when her phone rang during the ride. She reflected perfectly. I started to feel something I can only describe as the ground shifting. Not literally. Perceptually. Because the two possibilities I'd been holding, that these people were somehow different from normal people, or that my mirrors were occasionally malfunctioning, had both just collapsed. The same person could reflect one day and not the next. It wasn't about them. It wasn't about the mirror. It was about something that happened between them and the mirror. Something that changed. I don't know when I started looking at my own reflection differently. Maybe it was gradual, so gradual I couldn't point to the first moment. But by week 5, I was spending time in front of mirrors at home. Not grooming. Not checking my appearance. Just looking. Watching myself exist in the glass. Making sure I was still there. Because the thought had occurred to me, quietly, in the way the worst thoughts always arrive, that if it could happen to them, it could happen to me. That whatever state these people were in when they failed to reflect, it wasn't permanent, and it wasn't visible to themselves or anyone else, and they didn't know. M. Voss knew. She'd said, "You noticed." She'd said, "Most drivers don't." Which meant she knew she didn't reflect. Which meant she'd learned it somehow. Which meant someone had told her. Or she'd discovered it on her own. Which meant there was a moment, a specific moment, when she'd looked into a mirror and not seen herself. I can tell you the exact night the thought became unbearable. It was a Friday, around 1:15 in the morning. I'd just dropped off a passenger, reflected, normal, nothing remarkable, and I was stopped at a red light on Western and Cortlandt. Empty intersection. No other cars. I was alone in the cab. I looked at the rearview mirror. I could see the back seat. Empty. I could see the road behind me through the rear window. Dark. Still. I could see the air freshener hanging from the stem. I could not see myself. 2:13 a.m. Parked on a side street. Engine running. Mirror, empty driver's seat. Phone screen, my face, my hands, my cab, all there in the front-facing camera. Mirror, nothing. I touched my face. I could feel it. I looked down at my hands. I could see them. I turned on the dome light and the car filled with yellow, and I looked in the mirror and the lit interior appeared, seats, headrest, dashboard, but the driver's seat was empty. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera. Switched to selfie mode. There I was. Normal. Tired. Frightened, if I'm being honest. But there. I angled the phone toward the rearview mirror, trying to photograph the mirror's surface. In the photo, the mirror showed an empty seat. I took 14 photos. In all of them, my phone's camera could see me. In all of them, the mirror's reflection could not. I called my sister. It was almost 2:30 in the morning and she answered on the fourth ring, her voice groggy and annoyed, and I said, "Can you video call me?" And she said, "What? Now? Are you okay?" And I said, "Please." The video connected. Her face appeared on my screen, half asleep, one eye squinting in the phone light. "What's wrong?" she said. "Can you see me?" "What?" "On your screen. Can you see me?" "Yes, I can see you." "Marcus, what's going on?" I could see myself in the small preview window in the corner of the call. I was there. I existed on camera. I existed to her. I looked at the rearview mirror while she watched me through the phone. "Marcus." "Nothing. I'm sorry. Go back to sleep." "I'm fine." I was not fine. The next morning, Saturday, I stood in my bathroom and looked in the mirror above the sink. I was there. Normal. Reflected. Present. I went to the kitchen. Opened the microwave door and looked at the dark glass. There. I checked the hallway mirror by the front door. The glass window of the oven. The black screen of the television. Everywhere. Normal. Reflected. I existed in every surface. I left my apartment and got in the car. Sat in the driver's seat. Adjusted the rear view. Gone. Only in the car. Only in the rearview mirror. Only while I was in the driver's seat. The moment I sat there, I vanished from the glass. I tested it. I sat in the back seat and looked at the mirror. I could see myself. I moved to the passenger seat, visible. I returned to the driver's seat. Gone. I walked to a parked car on my street, a stranger's sedan, and looked in their side mirror. I could see my face. I went back to my cab. Driver's seat. Mirror. Nothing. The car. It was the car. Something about the car, or something about me in the car, or something about the 6 years of nights I'd spent in that seat looking into that mirror. Something had accumulated. Something had worn through. I didn't drive that night. Or the next. I told the app one was taking a break. I sat in my apartment and I could see my reflection in every surface and I felt like I was holding my breath waiting for that to change too. Monday. I needed the money. Rent was due in a week. I got in the car. The mirror showed an empty driver's seat. I drove anyway. First passenger of the night, a man going from Wrigleyville to Lakeview. I checked the mirror. He reflected. I didn't. Second passenger, a woman going from the Loop to Ukrainian Village. She reflected. I didn't. Third passenger, 2 college kids going from a bar on Lincoln to an apartment on Diversey. They both reflected. I didn't. None of them noticed. None of them looked at the rearview mirror and said, "Who's driving this car?" They just sat in the back and looked at their phones or talked to each other or stared out the window. My absence in the mirror was invisible to them. They didn't look. Why would they? But I thought about what it would look like if they did. An empty front seat. A steering wheel turning by itself. A car with no driver. Nobody looked. Nobody ever looks. By the second week of it, I started paying different attention to my non-reflecting passengers. The ones with the X. Because we were the same now, weren't we? Whatever they were, I was that too. At least while I was in the car. At least while I was sitting in that seat, looking into that mirror. I started wondering if they knew. If any of them had ever noticed. If somewhere in the city, there was a woman who'd caught her own absence in a bathroom mirror at a restaurant, or a man who'd walked past a store window and seen the street but not himself. Or if it only happened in specific places, specific contexts, the way it only happened to me inside the car. And then I started wondering something worse. I started wondering if it was spreading. Because my notebook had 46 entries in 21 days. Then 53 in 28 days. Then, after I started driving again, 71 in 35 days. The ratio was increasing. More of my passengers weren't reflecting. Not dramatically, not every ride. But the percentage was climbing. Week 1, about 15%. Week 5, closer to 25. 1 in 4 people getting into my car had no reflection. Was it always like this? Had I simply not noticed before? Voss. Had I been driving for 6 years, never checking the mirror with this specific attention, never seeing what was right in front of me? Or was it changing? Was whatever this was, whatever category of existence these people intermittently occupied, becoming more common? I thought about Voss again. Most drivers don't notice. How many drivers are out there, right now, ferrying people who don't reflect? How many barbers and dentists and fitting room attendants and hotel elevator operators are surrounded by mirrors all day and never looking, never checking, never noticing the empty spaces where people should be? Or do they all notice, eventually? Is that what this job does to you, this specific job, this specific activity of watching the mirror over and over, night after night? Does the repetition wear something thin? Does it make you see what was always there? Does it make you become what was always there? I'm 8 weeks in now. My apartment mirrors still work. Every reflective surface outside the car still shows me. I am still there, in every context except the one where I spend 40 hours a week. But last Tuesday, something shifted. I was at home. Brushing my teeth. Looking in the bathroom mirror. And for just a moment, less than a second, the mirror showed the sink, the toothbrush, the tile wall behind me, and nothing else. Then I was back. Solid. Reflected. But the gap had happened. I saw it. I didn't imagine it. It's leaving the car. Whatever it is. Whatever threshold I crossed when I started seeing it, started counting it, started becoming part of it. It's not confined to the rearview mirror anymore. It flickered in my bathroom. It flickered in my home. I think Voss was trying to be kind. I think when she said, "You noticed, and that matters," she was telling me something important. Something generous. I think she was saying, "This is what happens next." I think she was saying, "You have time, but not forever." I think the 46 people in my notebook, the 71, now, aren't sick, aren't dead, aren't supernatural. I think they're just further along. I think whatever we are when we're not reflecting, that's not the absence of something. It's not a deficit or a void. It's just a state. A way of being in the world that the world's surfaces can no longer confirm. And I think once you see it, really see it, not as an anomaly but as a pattern, not as a malfunction but as a frequency, you start to join it. I don't know what happens when it completes. When every mirror goes dark. When I stand in my bathroom and the glass shows only tile. When my sister calls and the camera shows an empty room. When I become, fully and finally, someone who exists only to direct observation and never to reflection. I don't know if I'll still be here. If here will still mean what it means now. I drove last night. 11 rides. 4 didn't reflect. I didn't reflect. The car moved through the city like a ghost carrying ghosts, and the ones who were still visible sat in the back seat and never looked up from their phones. I'm writing this at 3 a.m. I'm sitting at my kitchen table and the window is dark, and in the dark glass I can see the room behind me, the table, the chair, the coffee cup, the notebook. I'm there. I'm still there. But I'm checking more often now. And I think checking is part of it. I think the attention itself, the looking, the verifying, the need to confirm, is the mechanism. I think Voss stopped checking a long time ago. I think the people in my back seat who don't reflect have stopped looking for themselves in surfaces altogether. They've let go of that particular need. And I think that letting go isn't a loss. I think it might be the opposite. But I'm not there yet. I'm still looking. Still counting. Still sitting in this kitchen at 3 a.m., turning my head every few minutes to make sure the dark window still holds my shape. It does. For now, it does. But I've noticed that the checking has a rhythm to it now. Every 4 minutes. Sometimes 3. I don't set a timer, my body just turns. My neck rotates, my eyes find the glass, and I look. Confirm. Return to whatever I was doing. And then 3 minutes later, the pull comes again. I timed it last night. I sat at this table with a stopwatch on my phone and I counted the intervals between each involuntary glance at the window. 3:14 a.m., looked. 3:17 a.m., looked. 3:21 a.m., looked. 3:24 a.m., looked. 3:27 a.m., looked. 23 times in 1 hour. I documented every one. And what I noticed, what made me stop the exercise and put the phone down, was that I couldn't remember deciding to turn my head for any of them. Not one. The impulse arrived preformed, already in motion, and by the time I was aware of it, my eyes were already on the glass. I'm not checking because I choose to. I'm checking because something in me needs to be confirmed. And the need is getting louder. Thursday, week 9. I installed a dashcam. Not the kind I'd considered at Best Buy, not a passenger-facing one. I bought a small, cheap unit online and mounted it on the dashboard, aimed at the rearview mirror itself. I wanted to see what the mirror showed from an external perspective. Whether a camera, watching the mirror, would see what I see. I drove my shift that night. 9 rides. 3 didn't reflect. I didn't reflect. When I got home at 2 a.m., I pulled the SD card and loaded the footage on my laptop. The first ride, a man going from Humboldt Park to the West Loop. I remembered him reflecting. On the footage, I could see the mirror, and in the mirror, I could see his face. Normal. The second ride, a woman going from Logan Square to Bucktown. She had not reflected, I'd marked the X. On the footage, the dashcam showed the mirror, and in the mirror, she was there. I paused it. Enlarged it. The footage clearly showed her face in the rearview mirror's reflection. She was there, in the recording, in the mirror. But I remembered looking at that mirror and seeing an empty seat. I went through all 9 rides. Every passenger appeared in the mirror in the recording. Even the 3 I'd marked with X's. Even the ones I'd watched disappear from the glass in real time. And me. The camera showed the mirror, and in the mirror, it showed the driver's seat. Occupied by me. I was there in the footage. Reflected. Present. Every single frame. I sat at my desk for a long time after that. The camera sees reflections that I don't see. Or, the camera sees reflections normally, and I don't. Which means the mirrors aren't malfunctioning. The people aren't absent. The car isn't haunted or broken or wrong. I am. Something in my perception has changed. I am looking at mirrors and failing to see things that are there. Things that a camera, an objective recording device, registers without difficulty. The reflections exist. I just can't see them anymore. Not for myself. Not for certain passengers. I went back to my notebook. 71 X's. 71 passengers I'd marked as non-reflecting. And now I had to confront the possibility that every single one of them had reflected perfectly normally, and I simply couldn't see it. But that didn't explain M. Voss. She'd known. She'd said, "You noticed." She'd confirmed it, independently, without my prompting. Unless she'd meant something else entirely. You noticed. What if she meant, you noticed that you can't see me? Not that I'm invisible, but that your perception has a gap, and you're aware of it. Most drivers don't. Most drivers don't realize their perception is failing. Most drivers don't look closely enough to notice when a face fails to register in a mirror. They just drive. I messaged her through the app. It was 3 a.m. and I didn't expect a response, but I typed it out anyway. "This is your driver from 3 weeks ago. I need to ask you something. Please." I stared at the screen. The message showed as delivered. Read receipts were off. I waited 20 minutes and then I went to bed. She responded at 7:42 a.m. I was still asleep. I found it when I woke up at noon. "I remember you. You can ask." I typed 4 different messages and deleted all of them. What I finally sent was, "Do you know why I couldn't see you in the mirror?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Yes. I waited. Nothing else came. I typed, "Can you tell me?" Not through the app. "Can you come to the address you dropped me at? Tonight. After 10. I didn't respond for an hour. I made coffee. I sat in my kitchen and looked at the window, daylight now, so no reflection, just the building across the alley, and I thought about whether this was something I should do. Whether getting into a stranger's apartment based on a 2-sentence invitation was reasonable behavior for a man who was already experiencing perceptual anomalies. I said yes. I drove a short shift that evening. 4 rides, all before 10. 2 didn't reflect, or, I corrected myself, 2 appeared not to reflect in my perception. I was no longer certain which framing was accurate. The dashcam footage said one thing. My eyes said another. At 10:15 I pulled up to the 3 flat on Kedzie. The same block. The same porch light. I parked and sat in the car for a moment and looked at the rearview mirror. Empty driver's seat. The mirror showed the back seat, the road, the dark. I got out of the car and walked up the steps and pressed the buzzer for Unit 2. "It's Marcus," I said. The door buzzed open. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor. Warm. Smaller than I'd expected. Books on every surface, not arranged decoratively, but stacked in working piles with sticky notes protruding from the pages. The lighting was soft, lamps rather than overheads, and it smelled like black tea and something herbal I couldn't identify. M. Voss was standing in the kitchen doorway. Same face, same dark hair pulled back. She was wearing a sweater and jeans and she looked completely ordinary. "Do you want tea?" she said. "Sure." She made tea. I sat at her kitchen table, a small round one, barely room for two, and I looked around the apartment and I noticed something. There were no mirrors. Not in the kitchen. Not in the hallway I'd walked through. No reflective surfaces of any kind that I could see. The windows had curtains pulled across them, the appliances were matte finished, even the microwave door appeared to be covered with a thin piece of black fabric. She set the tea in front of me and sat down across the table. "You installed a camera," she said. Not a question. "How do you know that?" "Because that's what everyone does at this stage. You see it in the mirror. You can't explain it. So you add a second pair of eyes. And the second pair sees everything normally. And then you don't know which source to trust. How do you know what stage I'm at?" She wrapped her hands around her mug. "Because I was there. 11 years ago. And someone sat with me the way I'm sitting with you now, and told me what I'm going to tell you." I waited. "The mirrors aren't failing," she said. "And your eyes aren't failing. Both things are true simultaneously. The reflections are there, the light is bouncing, the physics is working, the camera records it all perfectly. But your ability to perceive reflected images of certain people, including yourself, is degrading. Why? I don't know why. No one I've spoken to knows why. I've met maybe 30 people over 11 years who experience this, and none of us have a mechanism. It's not medical. I've had MRIs, visual field tests, everything. My eyes are perfect. My brain is normal. There is no neurological explanation for a selective inability to perceive reflected light from specific sources. Then what is it?" She looked at me steadily. "It's a condition. That's the most honest word I have. A condition that begins with perception and doesn't stay there." "What do you mean, doesn't stay there?" She stood up and walked to the counter. There was a small mirror there, the only one I'd seen in the apartment, lying face down. She picked it up and turned it over and held it at arm's length, angled so I could see its surface. It reflected the kitchen. The table. My mug. My hands on the table. My chair appeared empty. I looked at her. She was holding the mirror, and in the mirror, her hand appeared to be gripping nothing. The mirror itself wasn't reflected, as if it were a hole in the image. "Watch," she said. She moved the mirror closer to her face. In its surface, I could see the refrigerator behind her, the cabinet, the wall. But where her face should have been, where the mirror should have shown me her features, there was only the kitchen. As if she were transparent. As if the light passed through her. Then she set the mirror on the table, reflective side up. "Put your hand over it," she said. I extended my hand over the mirror's surface. In the glass, I could see the ceiling above me. The light fixture. But not my hand. My hand was invisible to the mirror even though it was 3 inches above it. Even though I could see my hand with my own eyes, solid and present, the mirror showed clear air. "It's not just perception," she said. "It starts as perception. You stop being able to see reflections. But eventually, you stop producing them. For everyone. Not just for yourself." The dashcam. The dashcam will work for a while. Cameras compensate longer than eyes do. But eventually, the footage will start showing what you see. Empty seats. Empty rooms. And then it won't be about perception anymore. It'll be about presence. I pulled my hand back from the mirror. What does that mean? Presence. She sat back down. I mean that I haven't been photographed in 4 years. I mean that security cameras in stores don't register me. The footage shows aisles with no one in them during the exact minutes I was shopping. I mean that satellite imagery of this building doesn't show me on the porch when I'm sitting there. I mean that last year, my sister looked directly at me across a dinner table and her eyes unfocused, and she asked my mother where I was. She couldn't see you. For about 30 seconds. Then it passed and she could again. But it's been happening more. Not just mirrors. Not just cameras. People. Real people, looking at me with their real eyes, and for moments, for growing moments, I'm not there. I didn't say anything for a long time. The tea cooled in my hands. The apartment was very quiet. How many people? I finally asked. You said you've met 30. Approximately. Over 11 years. But I think there are more. Many more. I think most people this happens to never notice. They stop reflecting and they never look closely enough to realize. They lose their image in mirrors and they assume it's the lighting. They stop appearing in photographs and they think the camera malfunctioned. They become invisible to acquaintances for moments and they think people are being rude. It happens so gradually that a person could go through the entire process without ever consciously understanding what's occurring. The entire process, I said. What's the end of the process? She looked at me. And she didn't answer. Voss. Mara. Mara. What's the end of the process? I don't know, she said. I'm not there yet. None of the 30 people I know are there yet. But we've all noticed the same trajectory. The same slow expansion. Mirrors, then cameras, then human eyes. And each expansion takes longer to settle in. I lost mirrors in about 2 years. Cameras took another 4. Human perception started failing for me about a year ago, and it's still intermittent. So whatever comes after total perceptual invisibility, if there is an after, it's still ahead of me. But you think there's an after? I think there must be. Because the person who sat with me 11 years ago, the one who explained it to me the way I'm explaining it to you, I can't find her anymore. She stopped answering messages 5 years ago. Her apartment is occupied by someone else now. Her name returns no results anywhere. And the 3 other people she introduced me to during that period, 2 of them are also gone. Not dead. There are no death records. Just gone. As if they were never here. I stood up. Not because I wanted to leave, because my body needed to move, needed to feel itself in space, needed the physical confirmation of weight on floorboards and air displacing around me. You're saying I'm disappearing. I'm saying something is happening that looks like disappearing from the outside. But from the inside, from my experience, I don't feel less real. I don't feel like I'm fading. I feel the same as I always have. I think the people who are gone probably felt the same way right up until, whatever happens. That's not comforting. No. It isn't. I drove home at midnight. The streets were wet, it had rained while I was inside. The city lights reflected off the pavement in long, smeared streaks. Everything reflected. The buildings, the cars, the streetlights, the sky. The whole world was doubled in the wet asphalt, and I drove through it like a gap in the image, a hole the shape of a man and a car that the world's surfaces couldn't hold onto. My rearview mirror showed an empty cab moving through an empty street. I got home. I stood in the bathroom. I looked at the mirror. 3:47 a.m. I was there. Still there. But I noticed something I hadn't before. My edges were soft. Not blurry. I don't mean I was out of focus. I mean the boundary between my reflection and the wall behind me looked less certain than it should. Like a watercolor that hadn't fully dried. Like the glass wasn't quite committed to rendering me with the same conviction it gave to the towel rack and the shower curtain and the door frame. I leaned in close. 3 inches from the glass. And at that distance, the softness resolved and I was sharp and present and normal. But when I stepped back, 4 feet, 5 feet, the softness returned. As if distance itself were making me less legible to the mirror. I took a photograph. In the photo, I was clear. Sharp. Defined. But for how long? That was 3 weeks ago. I'm still driving. I still pick up passengers and mark my notebook and watch the percentages shift. 30% now. Nearly 1 in 3 people who get in my car are invisible to me in the mirror. And I have to keep holding both possibilities, I'm losing the ability to perceive the reflections of 1 in 3 people. The dashcam still shows everyone. 4 now. Mara and I have met twice more. She gave me 2 phone numbers, other people in the city who are at various stages. I haven't called them yet. I don't know if I will. Knowing there are others doesn't make the trajectory easier to accept. It just means there are more people on the same path, walking ahead of me into whatever comes when the last surface lets go. I'm still checking. Every 3 minutes. Every reflective surface I pass. I turn my head and I look and I confirm. But here's what I've started to notice, and this is the part one can't stop thinking about. I'm getting tired of checking. Not bored. Not distracted. Tired. A deep, muscular fatigue that settles into my neck each time I turn to look. As if my body is telling me that the effort of confirmation has a cost, and the cost is accumulating, and at some point the cost will exceed the value of what I'm confirming. And I think, that's how it happens. Not a dramatic vanishing. Not a sudden absence. Just a slow exhaustion. A gradual willingness to stop looking. To stop needing the mirror to tell you that you're there. To let the reflection go the way you let go of a name you've been trying to remember all day, not with loss, but with relief. Mara said she doesn't feel less real. She said the people who disappeared didn't seem distressed. And I think about that. I think about what it would feel like to stop needing confirmation entirely. To exist without the anchor of your own image. To move through the world without the constant check, the constant verification, the constant pull toward the glass. It sounds like freedom. And that terrifies me more than anything else. Because the fact that it sounds like freedom, that small, quiet thought, arriving unbidden, might be the exact mechanism by which this thing completes itself. The thing that looked like a perceptual anomaly, that looked like a medical condition, that looked like a mystery, might simply be the slow seduction of a person into releasing the one need that keeps them visible. The need to be seen. And once you stop needing it, once the tiredness wins and you let your head rest and you stop turning toward the glass every 3 minutes, maybe that's when the world agrees with your indifference. Maybe that's when the glass stops trying. When the cameras stop recording. When the eyes of the people who love you slide across the space where you're standing and find nothing to grip. It's 4:22 a.m. I'm at my kitchen table. The window is dark and the glass is showing me my kitchen and my table and my coffee cup and my notebook. I'm going to turn my head now and check. I'm going to do it. I'll do it in a moment. I'm just very tired tonight.